meeting of March 19th, 2021. Would you join me in the pledge, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. We have Mr. Elijah Strumway is on. Yes. Okay. And we have a quorum. Dr. Lisell could not make it today. Takes us to item 4, discussion of the FY 21-22 budget outlook.
Mr. Vice President and members of the board, it's been a year full of change, but one thing that's remained is our financial flexibility. That can be pointed back to years of carryover. The way last year kind of fell off a cliff at the end, we left a lot of money on the table. And also with the way the federal government has helped us with our COVID spending. So we'll talk more about that later, but I just want you to keep in mind that we have retained our flexibility, and this presentation will kind of go over our plans moving through that flexibility to a time when we would say recovery. So you guys can click through. A quick disclaimer, this is a brief snapshot. I think with all, you guys should know that it's hard to really give an entire year in a couple of hours. It's hard to give an entire year if we had a week to sit here and talk about it. So we take a snapshot, we discuss our plans ad nauseum, and we try to set up the platform that we're going to move forward with. So yes, things will change, and you'll know that I'll be in front of the board to talk about those things when they come up. If I miss anything in this presentation, if we miss anything, let's add it to the April agenda. So if you're like, I want to talk more about this, let me get a note and I'll get it on the April agenda for more discussion. Otherwise, I think we can just move forward. Well, the year's been subject to multiple fluctuations. We've lost a lot of students that were down over 400 from the projection I made at the beginning of the year. And if you'll remember, that projection was based on a flat growth. So what we ended last year with, I said we would start this year, and we are down about 450 since then. During this presentation, though, we're going to talk about a raise, some additional positions, a lowered student to teacher ratio, an amended pay structure for 2 employee classifications, and a new procedure for employees. We'll also take a general look at our budget, talk about the effect of federal money, look at our medical benefits, and discuss some personnel shifts at our schools. So here on this current year outlook, I'm trying to show you how the fluctuations work and how we operate. So what you see up top is M&O and capital after our December revision. During that revision, I folded in our annual financial report. So I had a target of how much carryover we had, plus where our revenue was because of students. So you'll see that capital grew, right? I've always talked about 6 million in reserves. Reserves got up to about 8.3. And so a feeling I had there was, how real is this moving forward? So a lot of that's shoved to the side, but then we did put money into budgets too. And we talked about this to make sure we hit some of our priorities for the year, especially when we had some money. But you'll see in May, we lose more students. And so I take that from the reserves to cover M&O. And so as we want to have that 6 million in cash reserves, we want to have that 1 million for budgeted carryover. Otherwise, we want to be able to spend our money. And when we come up short, we want to grab those reserves and make sure our priorities move forward. So that's what I'm trying to show you here. Any questions before I move? Okay. This is sometimes tough to swallow. These are the ADM fluctuations since the beginning of the year. Bottom is a graph that shows how that's gone. So 437 students down over the course of the year, that's about $2 million in revenue, right? Money that we just will not receive. we have strategically been discussing, I know with principals, with admin teams, how do we recapture these students? Because it can't just be COVID. So there has to be some sort of push from our district to, for lack of a better word, entice students to show up and to come back. So if we want to talk here anymore, just stop me.
Pop in there, Aaron, for a minute. That bullet point is really focused on the strategic planning process that we're currently engaged in. So we've completed our internal scan where we've looked at all of our demographics. Who are our students and our teachers? You know, what are our faculty attrition rates, our student attrition rates? We've narrowed it down to the myopic level and every detail we can think of who we are as a district. And now we have our committee broken into focus group interview sections. So we'll have student interviews, staff member interviews, general community member interviews, parents, local government, and business to ask then questions on, you know, what is your perception of KUSD? Well, we're looking at reasons people leave and reason people stay, and then what are other providers offering that KUSD could offer for just a glimpse of an example, that online component. We lost a lot of students to online schools, whether, you know, it was Primavera or the K-12 or some of the other providers. Is that COVID related or is that our new future? And so that's why Ms. Woolsey and her committee wrote an AOI, and we're going to have our own online provider. So that's what Aaron's referencing when he talks about how we're strategically looking at recapturing the 437 so we can better meet their needs, and then perhaps even more beyond that.
And I've heard a lot about the lack of proper gifted education.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'd be curious to know if a lot of those 437 students were our more high achieving gifted students.
Yep, that's a great point, Ms. Shumway, and that's one of the pieces that we're actually looking at. How do we cast the net to identify gifted and truly gifted? How do we provide services? And is it lacking at an elementary level versus a secondary level? And so that is one of our committees.
Are the losses pretty well spread over K-12, or you see it more at the high school level where students are choosing to get jobs?
It's both. It's really spread out across a lot of the younger ones. Some of them have gone to some providers like Ms. Shumway just referenced, where their smaller group or different offers if their student needs more enriching or enrichment and gifted services. Some are just staying home because of COVID. They don't want to be in schools. At the second, so those are the smaller ones. They're making private, personal family choices for their education needs. At the secondary, we are losing them less because they're afraid of COVID and more because they're getting jobs. And at the high school level, they're high school kids. And again, we'll have actual focus group interviews and data to bring you later, but our sideline conversations with high school students who are leaving and we're calling it, yep, I've got a job. I don't want to sit in a classroom all day, every day anymore. We got used to not going to school, and now I've shifted my focus to other things. So the students are making different choices at secondary, and families are making different choices at elementary.
You can move to the next slide. Okay, so here, keeping in mind when I showed you the fluctuations in a given year, this is kind of showing the fluctuations going into next year. This is about as conservative a projection I could give you. I don't include any increase in the base level support. We should expect to see some bit of increase, at least inflation. I do not include any sort of new revenue related to the propositions. I think they're 207 and 208. And so just saying, if everything stays the same, this is how we would look moving forward. And then I try to show how that would cause me to need to go into capital and move it over to M&O to make sure that we get to that 51 million, which I think we'll need to cover what we want in our general funds. Any questions on this? Okay. Now the fun part. So here's a proposal for raises across the district. You'll see in teachers, school admin, district admin, those are all salaried positions. We recommend a 2% base with longevity on top at 0.5%, 1%, and 1.5% based on 5 to 9 years, 10 to 19 years, and 20 plus years respectively. You'll see that we do not want to, I guess I don't have it here, we do not want to raise the starting salaries of those positions. We want to maintain where they are right now, but give this raise to the people who return as employees. Oh, sorry, maybe. And then here I show you a raise range for the returning employees across teachers, school admin, and district admin. You see that they can go, the minimum would be 2% and the max would be 3.5%. In classified, we have another slate of Arizona minimum wage. That's not to be confused with anything the Biden administration may be planning. So we can expect 15-cent increase next January. And so we'd like to fold that in now rather than reissue contracts in January. So they'd get the minimum wage that would increase position starting wages, but also for anybody working for us. And then their base would be 1%. And then you see the same longevity spread out the 3 classifications.
And Mr. Sherman, did we also have that same classified 15-cent this year?
Yes.
Yes, so that would be 30 between this year and next year.
Yeah, because we went up in January by 15 cents because I failed to budget for it or plan for it, I should say.
Have we done any surveys on teacher salaries, like Bullhead, Havasu, see how competitive we are or not with their salaries, as well as what they're doing with raises next year?
We did last year. So no, we did not reach out to other districts this year about what they're doing with raises. But last year we reached out to multiple districts and we had their starting pay, where their people are, how their cost of living compared to our cost of living. And so we didn't do that again this year, but that's something that we could if we needed to.
I suggest maybe taking a look at it just to see where we stand, since that is our competition here.
Roger, I can't hear you. Do you have a mic?
Oh, I do. Is this better?
No.
Can you hear me, Ms. Shumlin?
Yes.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks. What I was saying was do surveys locally with Bullhead and Havasu, see what their starting teacher salaries are, as well as what type of pay raises they're giving going into this next year.
You can create the exact same chart that we presented last year that shows after the red for red and after our significant raises the last few years where we fall in. We can easily do that.
Yeah, just update it with,
Yeah,
we'll reach
update
out
what
to
we
the
have.
same districts and get updated information.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, please.
For the budget projection,
Yes,
is that including this max rate?
on underneath here, the last slide. Yes. Yeah. But this is more, I'll give you what's compensation going to cost us in a few slides. This was more, here's the umbrella of it all and the money we have to make decisions with.
Right, but it does include this.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so the next thing I kind of was for Charlie, more for the readers of the thing. I can go into any more, but basically what I just told you on about the charts, this is here as well. That's just broken out on the next slide, the district raises. Do you want me to go further into the raises we're proposing, or did I explain it clearly? Okay. And I really do. I actually want this on the record. March 29 is when we expect, is when contracts will go out. Anyone hired after that date would not be subject to the district raise, because that's essentially an employee that's hired for next year rather than, that's not a returning employee. So I just want that out. So if the board if that's not the wish of the board, I wanted to make sure that I had that in there so you knew. We kind of create a cutoff line.
Yeah, what makes sense that after contracts go out, then anybody else hired for next year is a new hire.
Are you speaking, Beth? You have a mic?
Is that better? Can you hear me, Jen?
Can you hear us, Ms. Shumway?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Better?
Yes. Just pretend you're on American Idol. Hold it close.
Put your mouth on it.
Now I forget what I was saying.
Even employees that were hired like at the end of the year, and worked those last couple months, they wouldn't get a raise moving into the next year. The minimum wage, of course, but
New hires after these contracts go out
yes,
are considered new hires and not returning
yes,
for the pay scale.
yes.
I guess in a world where we have more latitude with finances, it'd be nice to be able to see a 3% base, but I do like the way that it gives employees additional funds or additional salaries for years of experience. I think that's good.
Do I understand you correctly that you would have liked to have seen a 3% raise, a base raise?
Well, at least consider it, I guess.
It was.
When you look at the teachers, have the base of 2%. You have to be with us 5 years or more to start getting longevity.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I was thinking about.
Okay.
And I like his suggestion too, because it reduces compression problems.
Yes, we're always keeping that in mind. I think, Roger, later I bring up the teacher compensation fund, which is money we think we've secured for that can only be spent on teacher salaries, and I'll walk through how we would apply that. So teachers most likely are going to see more than that 2%, but I'll have to finagle it because I won't get that money until June. But
Oh, that'd be great.
yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit.
Okay, yeah. Good.
Okay, so here we shift into a new position proposal. Now this is really new, but I think we're uniquely positioned to create a position like this because of our experience with communication at the administration level. So we are proposing a 12-month exempt communications manager at a starting salary of $50,000. Oh, I made a mistake. I should have put the date. There'll be 261 days. I'm sorry. Which is about $191 per day would it be the daily rate for this position. The justification here, and I will do some reading, internal and external communication has always been important to KUSD, but this last year ramped up the need for continual creative communication within the district, outside of the district, and through local media. The position would be directly supervised by the superintendent, while the district's finance director would act as the managing supervisor. This would be similar to the management structure of a newspaper, with the superintendent serving as the publisher, the final say on any sort of content that goes out, and the finance director serving as the news manager editor, the person that works directly with the communications manager to come up with story ideas, direct the way we want to put out content, interview potential, things like that, long year plans. And so the idea is that you kind of set it up like a mini newspaper that's at the service of KUSD only. And so that's the structure of it. Qualifications would be a bachelor's degree in English, communications, or journalism. I don't see us being able to accept less than that. Sometimes we do a preferred amount of education. I don't believe we could accept lower than that type of, unless someone had a decade doing it, like experience that's commensurate with all of that education. And then the documented ability to write stories, take photos, produce video and audio, and work directly with sources and supervisors. The interview process would be similar to that of a newspaper, where the high potential candidate would need to bring clips of their work, including photos, videos, anything they've done to show us exactly how their communication management works. And so we could see it. You can never really accept these things on face value. You have to see people's work.
So where did you come up with the 50,000 for the salary? Is that, did you do some research to find out if that's typical of this job?
I did a little research with another PR manager, but the main thing is that I fit it into our structure, right? So we kind of, at the top level of classified hourly, you can offer about $18 an hour. So but then you are limited to how many hours that person can work and overtime and all of those things. So the next step up is an exempt salary manager position in our district. Those are currently at 48426, but you'll see in this presentation, we're going to ask for those to be raised to 50. So we slotted them into that spot because the need for someone who can work at 6 o'clock at night or at 4 in the morning, get to our events, be available on the weekends and things like that. We need someone who's exempt from the hourly thing. And so that's the lowest we can offer an exempt position. The PR manager I works with is the PR person for First Things First. And she was saying that either of those salaries work, but when you lose the ability to get more than 40 hours out of them, you're going to lose some of that content.
Yeah. Isn't there a communications manager at the hospital as well? We could find out what they're making and see if we are competitive. Maybe with MCC. I don't know if MCC has one or not.
They used to. I don't know if they still do.
I believe they do, because we lost an employee to them for that position. Didn't we?
Oh,
Mr. Pope?
that reporter, didn't we?
No,
I
it
just
wasn't
want to
that.
make sure that we're competitive. I don't know if 50,000 with a bachelor's and experience is competitive.
I'll tell you, in this world that is competitive.
In the education world, is that
Oh, not in the, no, in the writing world, in the reporting communications world, this is more than competitive.
I see. Okay.
Walking into Kingman, they started me at $13.25 to cover education, government, and local businesses.
Oh,
So
you
it's
were underpaid.
but that's what I'm saying. This competes with any reporters looking at Kingman and considering it, or any new reporters that have potentially a couple years at a newspaper. Oh, I could take a big jump and do a lot of the work I like to do without that continual pressure of multiple beats.
Yeah. Well, I mean, 50,000 is more than most of our teachers are making with higher than bachelor's degrees. So I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also
The daily rate is important.
261 days versus 148. So that, yeah.
Yeah.
The daily rate is significantly less than a teacher, I think by almost $100, or a starting teacher, maybe 50. Aaron could tell
We
you.
come down in a little bit to that, and we'll be able to harken back to.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Will they be doing PR?
Yeah.
Okay. Most communication managers in the private world that does PR and the communications part starts usually about 60,000.
Yeah, I think the person at the hospital does something similar, but probably because of the days you're talking about. So are they working, what is it, 10 months essentially?
No, this is a 12-month employee, year round, 261 days.
Okay.
Where our teachers are 9 months, 144 days.
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
think it's pretty competitive.
Yeah.
If you equated it to a starting teacher, it would be, the teacher would have to start at 27,500. That equals this 50,000. because the 144 days versus the 261.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're competitive and, we get somebody that knows their stuff because we're compensating them appropriately.
Yeah,
Agree, thank you.
I think they will eat this up. I think appropriate, competent writers and content producers will eat this salary up if they want a piece of this job.
Okay, good.
I think too, you're putting a lot of emphasis on writing, but PR is going to be a really big portion of it. So you need to make sure they've got a lot of skills in that area too.
You're right.
PR and marketing,
Yes.
PR and marketing, yes, for
Mhm.
sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess I only say writing because even when they're just working with people, they've probably written it out already. Like it all comes back to that
Mhm.
content push, Do you guys want me to go? Did you guys look at the job duties? Would you like me to go through these?
Nah.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay, the next one is an information technology apprentice. So we propose to add a 12-month, again, non-exempt, that's an hourly position at a starting wage of $12.30 per hour. I have a bit here. I'm going to read again. The district's IT department is responsible for setting up and keeping more than 8,000 devices in the district in working order. Devices in this case refer to Chromebooks, laptops, and desktop computers. The department is also responsible for the district's network, its camera and public address systems, the fidelity of various online curricula, and an assortment of other things. And as we push into online instruction, even when the pandemic ends, our need for quality, creative, IT personnel is important. And so we came up with an idea of kind of a training structure. You would have a better chance of getting into the IT department at this apprentice level. And then over time, you're going to rise to the technician level. And then as IT has shown before, they have clear pathways into their administrative level from technicians. So if you add this apprentice, you essentially have every level covered and you can train people up and add new people as you go. If IT wants to add anything, they can, but I've worked very closely with Robbie to write this up. Okay.
I think it's a great idea, and I've always been amazed with IT, with how much they're able to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And every year we add hundreds and hundreds of more devices.
The need doesn't stop, right? We never hit like, okay, we're good on tech, guys. It just keeps coming. So,
Yeah, and this is setting us up for the future, which we're gonna need.
mm-hmm.
I have a question about other positions, though, whenever.
Go ahead.
Okay. It's wondering, where are we with counselors? Do we have counselors at each one of our schools? And as far as psychs, how are we set on psychs in our schools? Given what kids have been through this past year.
Can I turn to Gretchen and Jerry?
Yeah, and I'll refer to Vicky and Ms. Trio as well. Yeah, one of the changes that we're making, you'll see when Ms. Moreski takes over in a little while, is we're reducing the third administrator at Desert Willow due to student numbers. And in placement of that, instead of having an intern, hiring a full-time counselor. So that would be the last school, right, that we needed to have the full-time counselor at. So we are good to go on counselors. On school psychologists, I'll let Vicky share where we're at if you have it off the top of your head. It's always a work in progress.
You'll need the microphone.
We're still looking for school psychologists. Right now, our biggest problem is actually finding people to come to Kingman. If we're able to fill, I think we have 2 more positions left to fill, and then we'll have adequate school psychologists to meet the special education needs.
Okay.
Are we competitive as far as compensation goes for them? Is that why we can't get someone here?
We're competitive. It's just the whole world of special education. There's not enough workers in each of the different fields.
Okay.
So I think if we raised the salary significantly, we would still have trouble finding people to come.
Correct.
So in this discussion of counselors, did we look at behavioral health counselors, social workers?
We don't have social workers in this, but we have tried behavioral specialists in the past. Those are very hard to come by. And the ones we've been able to acquire have not worked out well for us.
So a couple of the shifts that we're doing, all of our counselors are being trained in the social emotional learning aspect. There's the required training. For example, Black Mountain is really leading the charge right now. They have a social emotional learning committee, and Vicky, Shelley, Jerry, and I were just out there for a several-hour presentation on Friday, where they're sharing the groups that they're holding with the elementary kiddos based on their needs, based on what's happening in the community. Then they're tracking that associated with the behavioral occurrences and needs in the school. So they're really driving down that road. They're now in the process of training all of their teachers to have the curriculum is Mind Up curriculum. We reviewed the curriculum. All the teachers are being trained in the strategies to identify the needs in the room. Talk about the brain, the social emotional aspect. They have all kinds of things going on. So that's happening at Black Mountain, and that is going to be pushed out district-wide as we work with all of the counselors. So those counselors really are shifting from guidance counseling, even at the secondary level, to that social emotional counseling. We just aren't hiring social workers to do it. Our counselors are doing it.
Do we have an extra position in this plan for a behavioral, social, emotional type of counselor?
You mean like district-wide, district level?
Yes.
No.
No.
We did add for our autism program, a special programs coordinator. It is already an existing position. That was another where we reduced a third administrator at a school, and in place of that, put in someone who could handle, and Vicki could talk about the job duties to that. For all of our special ed programs, the uniqueness to the behaviors and the social emotional needs, we do now have a district, would you call her person for that?
The autism
The new
support
position
program.
that you just
Yeah.
filled? Yeah, do you want to explain what she will be doing?
We're very excited. We're going to have an autism support campus at Little Explorers, La Anita. Our students with autism eligibilities are growing greatly. So ultimately, we'll have the K-8 students there and the 9th, 12th at Kingman High School. Our specialists will be able to address the behavioral concerns, help those students learn how to function in a classroom, and give them those supports and skills needed, the social emotional skills. We'll be able to work with the teachers to help with the training, the visual schedules. So it's really exciting. So that will be what we'll be doing in July. And since the word has been out that we're doing it, I've received 4 phone calls from parents this week who are interested in bringing their students. So our autism population in Kingman is growing, and there's not a lot to offer. So we're kind of excited that we're going to be able to provide this for them.
But if you would like us to look and report at the April meeting on what it would look like if somebody were in charge of that as a district-wide, we can do that.
Yes, and I'd like to ask if we can look at being flexible for 2 positions added that will be in this realm. We're probably going to need another autism person ASAP and a social, emotional, behavioral type counselor, whatever licensing or certification we can get. You know.
It shouldn't be too difficult to fold in. So
Good. Thank you.
can I move or would you like more? Good, okay. Okay, this is new as well. This is a pay change proposal. So the district has 5 official director positions: federal programs, human resources, IT, special education, and finance. Currently, there's a de facto probation year for new directors. So they start at $70K for 261 days. You'll see that's 268 a day. After their first year of that de facto probationary year, they jump up to 75,000, which is a 287 a day or 35.91 an hour From then on, they just fold in with any other district increase. So for context, we'll look at some of the daily rates for the positions we would most likely see move into a director position. Up top, you have the average salary in the current year for district directors. That's 85,894, about 341 a day. That's that 261 day schedule. So you see down on our average for principals, they're about 81,907 for 180 days. So that's 455 a day versus the 341. So enticing a principal into a director's position includes enticing them into taking a pay cut. And so ultimately it creates a difficult transition for us to, I mean, we have directors now, but as you know, sometimes we don't, and we have a limited pool of people to choose from. So you also see with assistant principals, 392 a day. So even our average assistant principals right now are making more on average than our directors if you look at a daily rate comparison.
Is it a
And then down,
I'm sorry.
go
Is it
ahead.
a requirement for to be a director, you have to have been a principal? Could you not go directly from being a teacher with the proper credentials into a director position?
I think you could.
I mean, you could technically, but I wouldn't recommend someone going from teacher to director, because directors have, the journey of leadership is a part of, to me, what is important to being a director, is having sat in the chair of a principal, because you're now directing principals and programs. And so while technically you could, I think it would be difficult for someone to do that.
So it's not practice. We typically,
It's preferred that you have leadership experience, I believe, when we post those jobs.
I agree with that. I think leadership and administrative skills are extremely important in that position.
But technically, if a teacher came through with lots of experience and proof of leadership and knocked the interview out of the park, they would have just the same opportunity to become a director that anyone would, right? I think on the,
Wouldn't preclude the best candidate, for sure.
right,
I'm just talking globally and based on experience.
mechanically it could work, but theoretically it's hard to do because of that leadership portion, I think is what we're saying.
okay. I guess I have this idea of this upside down structure where I think the teachers should be getting paid more than anyone else, and they take on more responsibility. And as you go higher up in the current structure, you should get paid less, in my opinion, because I think we need to, I don't know, I have a whole idea of teacher led schools, and this idea that the principals take on the responsibility, but they really, I don't know, it should be more of a supporting role, in my opinion, to the teachers, and then directors from there. So I know it's I can't see your faces, but I imagine what they look like. So I have a hard time thinking about, seeing, we have teachers that are super competent. We've got some teachers with doctorates. We've got nationally board certified teachers who are out there at conferences giving lectures. And this idea that, we have to pay the dues. We have to go through a principalship to be able to direct, a program just seems like, I don't know, old school.
I'd like to piggyback on that discussion, in that there's a difference in the energy taxation on a person depending on their job. And when we're discussing social emotional learning, teachers and principals have a lot more on their shoulder than a director, because I've been a manager in kind of a management type position. When you and then as a teacher, when you have all these souls that you are in charge of all day long in front of you, it's a different taxation on your person. than a director, or a person working more at a desk. Does
I,
that make sense?
it does, and I could tell you that I have sat in every position in this district. I have been a classified employee. I was a speech pathologist's assistant. I was an assistant in special education program, and a teacher on assignment, and a vice principal, and a director, and then a principal again, and now a superintendent. And I can tell you, because I have walked 2 moons in every set of shoes, that every job is different, and every job is there's taxation in all of them. I loved being in my room with my 30, 35 kiddos, and it was exhausting. But I'll tell you, as a director, you're so global, and there are so many moving parts and moving pieces that you have to be juggled. Like if you're the grants director, you have to know, all the compliance, be on it, be following it, dot your I's, cross your T's. Or the finance director, if he blows it and our budget goes down, so do our salaries. So every job has its difficulties, and I totally agree teachers should be paid. And I think we've been working really hard to make sure they are paid, but I can't say that any one of these people have what you describe as a desk job. We do sit at a desk occasionally. We have to, because our computers are there and we have to create, but there is a lot to be said about responsibility, as one of you mentioned. And like I can tell you, I truly understand the responsibility in every one of those seats, and I don't put more value on one than the other. But if you're going to grow people, you need principals at schools. I'm not opposed to teacher-led schools and collaboration. I think that's a fantastic idea. I'd love to hear more, Ms. Shumway, but someone's got to be responsible for leading it, for organizing it, for managing change, for managing initiatives, for organizing the collaboration, for organizing, there's management and leadership that goes with it. And if anyone is suggesting that you should make less as you gain more responsibility, I think we'll be in real trouble finding people who want to do that.
I don't think that's it. I don't think it's making less as you get more responsibility.
I thought I heard you say that.
I think we all shoulder a lot of responsibility. Teachers, I think, shoulder the most. But that's just my opinion. and I think they recognize that. But what I'm saying is this idea that we have to have this structure so that teachers will want to stay with us because the opportunity to move up, quote unquote, is there. Teachers don't leave the classroom because they want to make more money. Teachers leave the classroom because they're done. And so it would not be difficult to get teachers to move up into another position if that position paid the same, but they had a reprieve. The idea that they're just burned out and they need something different. If the positions, as you say, all have their own struggles, and they were qualified, there's a lot of teachers that would do it just because they need a change of scenery.
Right. I did not leave the classroom because I was burned out in any way, shape, or form, and neither did Eastman or Trujillo or Woolsey, who are all shaking their heads in here.
Those that actually leave.
Oh, leave the profession?
Yes.
Yeah.
They leave because they're done, not because they weren't being paid enough.
Okay.
I guess my view on the salary is our directors, our administration works 12 months a year.
They do.
Maybe more.
They work 12 months a year. They do.
I have to differ with you a little bit on that.
Did you
Maybe some do, but not all of them.
And Carol, you were saying money-wise, if we compare a full year, they're getting paid about the same. Yeah.
Sure. They are.
So what I was thinking is that this is a good discussion in that we need to be recognizing yes, teachers do the intangible for most people. Most people don't understand how much of a taxation the work is of a teacher until they're a parent full-time, and had to be the teacher too. And principals, of course, they have the responsibility of the students too, and the building maintenance and all the employees and all the management, and then they have a supervisor constantly in the middle. And I know that's a very difficult, taxing job. The emotional taxation of a director, this is where I was going, is more of a who the person themselves is that's doing the job. Because some people are just really good at being able to deal with other people and giving bad news or giving good news or whatever the stresses are at that time, but they're able to walk away from, whereas a teacher can't walk away from that emotional problem that's going on. Neither can the principal. So I don't know that we need to consider a director and a principal as one follows the other.
It's not that, we're just trying to show you the structure of the most likely employees to move up that have the leadership experience in our district. Because the leadership is, and
Right. Well, leadership is critical. I understand what we're.
it's
where
a,
we're
it's
going
as
with it,
very
but we're talking
emotionally
about
taxing as
salaries.
well.
Yeah, but we're talking about salaries.
We
And
are.
trying to compare principals and directors, I think, is apples and oranges because of the personality it takes to do those jobs. There are a lot of people that can transfer and do both. You know, like you guys are all examples of that. And I was an example of that. But that's not everybody. And I don't think, and we've already established you don't have to be a principal to be a director.
No.
So they're not in line, up and down, horizontal. Yeah, they're more of a, I consider them more of a, they're just different. So I don't think that our salaries are off.
Okay.
Look at the
Not either.
responsibility if we were to compare job descriptions. Principals, what are the day they work 180 days versus
Yes.
directors work 261. So 42 and 45. I mean, that makes sense to me. And then, if you look at the job descriptions or the education level or the responsibility level, they're probably similar. You can't be a principal, without having some leadership skills. So of course I have not looked at those job descriptions, so I'm just guessing, but to me, the difference might be the longevity pay. It makes sense that directors and principals could make the same salary per hour, not necessarily per year.
Well, and to be real, when we're talking about the days, do principals stay at 180 days of work? I mean, on the books, but their actual life.
No.
They take phone calls in the night. They take situations over the weekend.
Then we have to consider that for directors as well. So we have to create a baseline. The baseline on the contracts these are the days. If we want to talk about days worked as an absolute value, then your directors are closer to 300. But we can't just say that because our contracts are based on another thing. Directors are expected to, at all times, make sure their work is done no matter what happens. And I'm sorry, but as you go down the line, that is not the case. It is not. Sometimes the case is that we will do extra work for money, for additional money, stipends. That's not happening up top. And so we have to create a baseline, and the baseline is 261, 180, 148, 151.
Sure. And for teachers, I mean, if you were to compensate them for every day they worked or every program they went to, or When, anything that they went to, I mean, we would be sitting here talking about adjusting the days as well. So I think we have to agree in education, the days that are said that we are getting paid for is not the days that we work. In general, across the board, we work more than we're compensated for, period.
I agree, Ms. Shumway, in every
Yeah,
in every
yeah.
category outside of classified.
Right.
But we have gotten very good at paying daily rates during the summer. Like, for example, teachers that are teaching summer school for 14 days, they can make $2,000. We're really working on compensating them, so every teacher has a lot of opportunities to be paid for their extra days in the summer versus where it was for quite a while where we didn't have the money to do that. So that's good news on that side too.
And I have to say, this board has been very adamant about giving teachers raises and compensation. We've always wanted to do that. And I know, do directors get any part of the 301?
No.
No, no. I mean, we try with stipends and the 301 and some of the other initiatives to give the teachers more money as much as we can. So,
That's because we can't get them here. We have to do everything we can to be competitive. And even when you think about, I was just thinking about that communication job, if you were looking for a PR person for a private firm, that salary would probably be double. But because we're in the education world, that's competitive. If we're talking about finding a counselor, in the education world, pennies on the dollar what you could make in the private sector. So we all kind of accept that, not rightfully so, not, it's unfair, but we all kind of accept that we are working in education and therefore our salaries are going to reflect that. I wish that weren't the case, but the reason all of those things take place for teachers, the 301 and the stipends, is because they are the unicorn in the African desert. We are having more difficulty filling teacher positions because they're not joining. They're either leaving the profession completely or they're just not going to go through that process to become a teacher. So, I mean, that's why those things are in place.
And we definitely want to compensate them for their degree, their expertise, their professionalism. It's to attract them in some way, but it's also to show the value that we feel they give us. Not just to attract them, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think that's why the implementation of the longevity raises is really important to compensate those that have stuck with us. But you still have to attract the newbies that, maybe a diamond in the rough and stay with us forever. But I mean, that's what I was saying. That's why the 301 exists. That's why the stipends are unique to teachers. And I mean, if a principal chose to do a position that was a stipend payment, could they not get that stipend?
It's very, very rare that a principal will receive a stipend. It's only when they're asked to go completely outside of their job duties and do something additional. But for the most part, no, principals do not get compensated for their additional time in the same way that teachers do.
So if the position was a stipend position for tutoring after school, that principal would not be compensated?
No,
They did that?
that's how we've had it, is no, we wouldn't compensate that.
Really?
You're saying there have been a couple
There's
of
been-
instances
there's
if
been a few,
if
right.
there was nobody available.
Mhm.
I think I can recall a couple of grant situations, I think.
There was one time an assistant principal acted as the intervention coach, so to speak, and that person received a stipend outside of it because we're saying you're going to control all these grant interventions. But no, if a principal came in and did
Just
some
normal
tutoring,
or summer school.
No.
Now, we did, for transparency's sake, because there's always people watching that say, wait a minute, I know something.
Mhm.
For the online during this COVID year, when Ms.
Yeah.
Wilsey was looking for online teachers of record, and we had so many students and not enough teachers of record to go around. We did have to ask a few administrators to be a teacher of record if they qualified. For example, we had an administrator who was formerly a science teacher. We needed a science teacher of record. That would be an instance, and only during this COVID year, where we said, we got to have your services. You're a science teacher and we don't have one. So there are a few cases, but the practice is no.
Yep.
I never had a stipend in all my years of administration for anything.
It was
and
a-
I was fine. That's what I signed up for. Like you mentioned earlier, I did it.
There's
for
a
different
policy
reasons.
in place, or a procedure was in place since I've been here, that was a no admin stipends. I think Mr. Jackson would probably remember that. So if that was something we wanted to discuss, that's always something to discuss. It's the board's pleasure.
Yeah. If they're doing, if that's outside of what they would normally do, I think we should compensate anybody who goes above and beyond for the district and fills a gap that needed to be filled. And we would have paid extra for that, no matter who was doing it, as long as they were qualified.
Yeah. even if it was a
That's
director.
crazy to me.
And can I ask then this note at the bottom? I think it pertains to what we're discussing. Director salaries are based on 8-hour days.
Yeah.
And comparison salaries are based on 10-hour days. What were the comparison salaries that you're referring to?
Principals, assistant principals, instructional coaches.
Okay.
Those are 4-day-a-week employees. So they're 40 hours. Oh, excuse me. Those are, yeah, 4 days a week. So they're 40 hours is spread over 4 days,
Oh, okay.
10
So
hours a
you're-
day.
You're just showing that they're 40 hours each, but they're in a different.
Right, because if I'm saying how much per hour on the 261 daily rate, I got to divide that by 10 versus the principals where I divide it by 8. I'm just making sure I'm transparent with my math.
So
There are some director positions that are not, it just doesn't make sense that we would hire, for example, a principal to like Miss Moreski's job, right? You have to be uniquely qualified and hold a different degree to be an HR director. For Aaron's job, you have to, have finance skills and degrees. So we can't say that you go from teacher to principal to director, because that's not, those are unique skills. So to say that this is the path that we would like to put people on so that we can promote them as part of our thanks for sticking with us.
No, I don't.
That's not
That's
what we're
not
saying.
what we're saying. He's just
Mm-mm.
giving you comparison. You're right. The HR director and the finance director are unique qualifications, some oftentimes from industry. And I'll let Aaron explain the slide a little bit more.
I just want to say that we had a former principal as our HR director, I think, for 7 years. So it is not out of the question that someone would move up into that position from the district. And I didn't come here as a director either. I moved up through it. So no, we're not saying, hey, this is the path to district directorship, but we are saying that oftentimes principals become directors. In the case of 2 people that are sitting here right now, I have 2 principals who are directors, and I have assistant superintendent who was a director, who is also a principal. And we have, so it does happen. So
Sure.
it's not, this is your path, but this is what happens in our district. And when a principal does get a director position, we have a salary issue with that person.
We could also add, Mr. Sherman, that Ms. Moreski came from industry at another state and did take a significant pay cut when she took the position here. And I know the finance, and you know this too, the financial officers at the hospital, the city, the county are significantly higher. So you're right when you say in education all the way around, it is a situation.
When I was in the private sector, my managers made about $50 an hour. I was a VP and my managers underneath me made about $50 an hour. They were director. Actually, they didn't have a director title, but they did the same type of work.
And
So-
we've seen the meme that goes around, if you're babysitting 36 kids and you're going to pay this, you should be making close to $1 million a year. We've all seen that. So we should all agree that nobody's getting compensated for what they truly are doing in the education world compared to the private sector.
I don't think that's our discussion. Our discussion here is that we're proposing a pay change and we wanted to give you context. I don't think anything here, at least from my perspective, is none of us are paid enough.
Well,
But if I'm to ask you to raise the director pay, then I have to show you context for the rest of the district.
sure.
I think what we see when we look around the room is we have to grow our own most times
Mhm.
in Kingman Unified School District. And I think Arizona at large has the same kind of problems because of the salaries that we pay. So we have to have a system that recognizes that we're going to have to grow our own. And there has to be some type of fairness that goes as you move through these various jobs. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're talking about this.
Well, I think there's the rub though, is what grow your own means. To me, grow your own means we start with a baby teacher and we grow her or him into a nationally board certified teacher who, takes on leadership roles, not growing into 5 or 6 different positions up at the district office. I think growing our own means taking something fresh out of college and making them uniquely qualified to do the job that we would have a hard time finding otherwise. So I don't think growing your own is moving up in the pay scale.
Well, I think there's different pathways that you can take. One of the pathways that you just discussed is certainly a viable pathway. There's others that move into administrative positions. It's all being considered, but we are where we are because of the compression that we're experiencing right now, right?
I'm not saying I'm against pay raises in general. I'm just saying that this entire pyramid is upside down, and I think it needs overhauled.
Okay, any other discussions?
No.
All right, Aaron, let's move forward.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the next page would probably help with this whole discussion.
Mhm.
Okay, so the proposal is that we remove the de facto probationary year and then raise the starting salary to 80, which is 306 a day or 38.31 per hour. Brand new teacher makes 37,075 or 251 per day, meaning directors would start at $55 more per day than teachers under this proposal. Current directors, if we were to get approval from the board on this, the district would apply a $5,000 bump to their salaries, then add the district raise that we've already discussed. If that were to happen, that would bring the average director salary in our district currently to $93,480 for 261 days, 358 per day, $44 an hour, or $45, I'm sorry. If you want to discuss more, go ahead. That's the proposal we're making.
I don't see, personally, everybody here needs a raise. I don't see any problem with this if we're able to afford it. I think it might be a good idea if we have that comparison to other schools to discuss with this.
Yeah, we did a comparison and it was a little bit difficult. Some positions came back as hourly, where like the superintendent was their HR director as well as their finance person. And so they had a couple classified underneath them to do it. But if it comes to like Casa Grande, we're about equal with them right now. If it comes to Flagstaff, they start their directors up at $88,000 per hour. So we did call other districts. It's just, it was hard to compare. It was so far all over the place with the way they handle directors.
Okay.
This is a pay change proposal for our manager ones. Jen, we brought this up a little bit when we were talking about the communications manager. So we propose, excuse me. Managers currently start manager ones at 48,426 for 261 days of work. On average, they make 51,758 of the managers in our district currently. We propose raising their starting pay to 50,000. It's more conducive to our entire district level exempt schedule. And so that would look like essentially you would apply a 1574 bump to their salaries, and then you would apply the raise that has already been proposed. And on the next page, it shows the new hire placement district level exempt of the current year and the new hire placement district level exempt that we're asking for next year. And I've highlighted the directors and the managers on that.
What positions are manager one, manager two?
Let's see, we have a grants manager, we have a business office coordinator, we have a network administrator, a systems administrator, a cybersecurity administrator, and a human resources manager. And now, and we're asking for the communications. So that's it. That's them.
What's manager two? Because I see you have manager two under director.
That's our current transportation manager and our facilities manager.
Okay.
Facilities used to be a directorship, but over time we moved it down and changed the duties.
So my thinking now is going to long-term. I mean, everybody's been needing these raises. There's no doubt about that. And I'm not against implementing this. I just want that with all the raises that we're talking about and everybody being at this better level, what, 10, 15 years ago, if we had been working on raises before the bust, we could have all been in even more trouble than we were. And so I'd like to see a 10-year projection. If all the teachers stayed and got the longevity raises, and all of these positions got these continual increases, what is our budget going to look like then? Is it potentially that we're going to budget ourselves out of what the state will give us?
And so you want to see what everybody stays in the entire district and what that looks like in a decade. And then I will do that, no problem. I don't know if I can have it done by April though.
What percentage of people stay in the last, I think you could do that. If we, over the last 10 years, we've had 75% people stay, then, and then project. That might be more of a realistic projection.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, that's part of what I was getting at earlier, where this current year budget, it doesn't even consider what the state's going to give us next year. It says the state closed its doors and you're getting the same thing you got last year, which we know at a minimum won't be true. By law, they have to raise inflation. So I am always trying to get us, make this work on a smaller budget, knowing the growth is coming, and then I'll easily be able to handle it then, and then kind of rinse and repeat. So I'm always behind the money that we receive or the money that is left over. But I'll project that out over 10 years and show you what that looks like.
Thank you.
If I was to do that on insurance, so insurance has increased by 700,000% in 10 years.
Well, and unfortunately for your brain, we also, I mean, to be realistic, we would need to show what increases of all of our other expenses too. Give it a flat percentage increase. Or
Well,
something.
I would probably just stay away from all that and just say, this is what it looks like compensation. And then we'd use a percentage of how much of our budget is compensation. And so that's how I would do that. I can't get into what buses we're gonna buy in a decade, but I hear you. I'll get something. Anything else you guys want to talk about on this? Okay. So on the next slide, I just give a comparison so you guys can see the district as a whole. These are salaries on this page. It shows the 22 base, next year's base, the 22 average, if all of these raises are approved, and then the current year, 21, and the 21 average. So you can see in most cases, if not all of them, our average pay for the people we have is well above the starting. Do we have any questions here or anything you guys would like to highlight?
And that's due to longevity, correct?
Yes, and returning employees.
My brain's just trying to be more flexible in reading this at the moment, because I'm not used to reading this. So we're talking current base for next year,
Yep,
the average of all of that category,
yep,
the current base for this year,
yep,
and the average of all of that category.
yes.
Okay.
To show you the effect of the raises.
So again, here, the teachers have the least increase.
Didn't they have the most increase 2 years ago?
Well, their average is 7,000, more than 7,000 above their base.
No, I'm talking about from 2021 average to 2021-22 average.
Yes,
So there's an 800 about dollar difference.
mm-hmm.
But as you, I'm looking at the last column and this and the third column, comparing them. Teacher, well, no, instructional coaches actually have less than 300 increase, but as
Right.
you go down, it gets significantly more.
And it's really, and that is subject to the group of people we're looking at, right? If I'm looking at 6 psychologists who all come back, it's going to look a lot different if I'm looking at 300 teachers with turnover in some of those groups. So this accounts for like people who are said, I'm not coming back next year, right? They might be at 50,000 in the current year, affecting that average. Next year, that position slated for 37,075. So the change in average pay is just as much reliant on how many people are in those classifications as it is on the change itself.
And
I mean, it just goes to show you, we lose teachers. We lose them significantly.
right, this comparison page probably does not fit what we've been talking about very well. For in mindset that we're discussing,
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't, all of these hidden things that are relied on in order for the average to
Right.
be taken.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But if I were to
but
just,
the teachers had the average increase 2 years ago where the rest of this didn't.
we've been able to apply the increases across. If you remember, all of this 20 and 5 or 20 and 4, that happened district wide. Classified was a little bit different, but
The 20 and 20 raises,
Yep.
mhm.
they were only for teachers,
As far as the,
state.
yes, as far as the
Mhm.
state goes, our district applied those to,
But we went all across the board.
yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
It
Because,
just seemed like we had given the teachers more of a percent increase than we did the rest of
The
the.
base, you did.
Yeah, we increased the base for compression and other things.
And the amount of money that we're gonna get from 208, fingers crossed, knock on wood, all that good stuff. That for the most part is going to go to teachers, correct? Have we started talking about what that's going to look like, or is that a 2022 discussion?
well, that's what I'm saying is that I don't know what they're doing and we have to get these contracts out. So that's why this budget is going off of current year numbers. We know there should be additional revenue from 208 as well as from the teacher compensation fund that we secured. But at this moment, we don't have that, so we can't make a promise or make a plan without those numbers.
But if those numbers come in and we're able to get maybe our base salary to 45,000 for teachers, does that obligate the district to bump all the rest of the people in the chain up to prevent compression?
It doesn't obligate us because that's up to the board. You tell me in that situation because the board decides. When we tried to just raise teacher and principal pay, we got extreme backlash. I think even you stood at the board and said something about it, that no organization would only raise the pay of one classification.
That wasn't me. That wasn't me, because I always felt like teachers needed to be the rock stars and be making the $1 million salaries personally. So I would be curious to see how the increased funds that are meant specifically for teachers and attracting teachers affects the salaries on up. But we can't predict that right now, so it's not a conversation for right now, but I'm curious.
And I'll show you later in the presentation how I would like to get money in their pockets for next year outside of these salaries without forcing us to reissue contracts and go through the whole process. That even though, yeah.
On this chart, oh, thank you. On this chart as well, all of the salaries depicted would be actual numbers with the exception of the teachers, correct? Because the teachers, the 301 money is not factored into
No.
this. And so really, if you're looking at it in comparison, the other numbers are actual numbers, and that the teacher salary number would be approximately 10,000 or 8,000 more.
It's been, yeah, over the last 3 years, it's been 10 to 12,000 above it with 301.
And that's always been my issue, is I don't think 301 money should be factored into teacher salaries. One, because it fluctuates so much, and two, because it doesn't come out of the district's pocket. So while the whole point of 301 was to compensate and attract teachers, so using that to, plug into and then build off of subsequent manager 1, manager 2, that's I know those aren't, that's, so we should say assistant principal, principal. That's, I don't think that's not what 301 was intended for. So I think it's fine that we don't account for that.
Yep. I agree with you, but just really carefully, 301, it does come out of our pockets because at least one of those buckets can be used on M&O expenses and district operations, but we choose to go teachers instead. So, I mean, you are taking some operational power out of the district's hand in order to compensate teachers. And I don't agree that we should have it buried in their salary, but we also shouldn't pretend it doesn't exist. Like, we don't want to ignore it.
No, it's a gift to thank our teachers. And I think that's what it was intended to be when voters voted for it.
I
Okay.
agree, but in many districts, is it embedded in the salary?
Yes.
So when we do comparisons, as was suggested, and we call other districts to see their average salaries, more often than not, it's included. So it's important to know that, Ms. Shumway, because while it is a gift and we agree totally with what you're saying, when it's viewed, the optics are another district makes more on average than we do. We have to disentangle whether or not they've got 301 included in that and we don't, because their gift is included optically and ours isn't.
So how do they do that when it varies every quarter?
They would just varies every quarter.
I don't know how often they give you 301 money. I don't know. It's been a while.
It's annual. I know what my 301 payment's going to be for teachers on an annual basis. It's part of the budgeting process. They say, here's what you're getting, here's what you have left over. What are you going to do with it? And I have to set that very early.
And wouldn't you say, and Mr. Dax could speak to this too, because he lived through it for 11 years. In some cases, if a district chooses to embed it in their base, especially when that cliff was sort of looming and we thought it was going away, those districts could have potentially been faced with a financial crisis
Yes.
where they had it included in the base. They would have had to have either done a drastic reduction in their base where we would not need to do that, or they would have to suddenly have a windfall of finances that allowed them to continue with that, right, Mr. Jacks?
That's true. That's exactly right.
So
When-
we're
When does 301, go ahead.
we're being cautious by not including it. We could put it in parentheses or something like that. But
But we're also being transparent, right? I think we're on the same page with this.
When does 301 end?
There's no date of end at this point. They could change how they allocate it in the coming year because they did that. They shifted the money that was meant for SFB into the coffers, but that's something that I could see that in the base rate next year. So that's why I've been so hesitant to even think of what the state's going to do with our base level support. I don't see an end in it currently.
Okay.
Okay.
The next page is the same thing, but with hourly employees. If you'd like to stop there for anything, we can.
Currently, we're above what the state minimums are, correct? On our lowest paying,
We're at the state minimum.
on our lowest pay.
Yes, $12.15 an hour is current minimum wage, and that is our lowest category that we offer. The custodian is at $12.15.
Oh, but for next year, we're going to be above it.
No, for 6 months we will be, yeah.
Okay.
At least until January. I see what you're saying. I'm sorry.
so are these all moving up accordingly? So it looks like everything is going up.
Yep.
Dog's barking. Everything looks like it's going up 15 cents.
Yeah, and you'll remember back on the raise proposal, I said that with classified, we have to start them with a 15% or 15-cent increase across the board to accommodate for minimum wage increase in January. Because here we would argue that compression in the classified realm is way different than the certified realm, and it's important for us to maintain a separation of classifications.
No, I agree. I like that everybody got the bump.
Okay. Shall I move? Okay. Talk student to teacher ratios proposal. So there has been a drop in student enrollment, as we've talked about, but we'd like to propose a reduction in the ratios by 2 students across all grade ranges. The change, combined with a commitment from the district to ensure we staff at those ratios moving forward, will actually save the district money because the process reveals more positions to close rather than new positions to open to accommodate for the lower ratio. So though most of the changes will come through attrition, there are several unique positions where we will request to close through a reduction in force. As enrollment grows in the coming years, the district will maintain its commitment and hire teachers to accommodate as the students come back. On the next page is what those ratios look like.
This is something we've been wanting to do for years, and it's nice to see that financially we're in a situation where we can start that reduction.
It's crass, but there are a few benefits that we are experiencing because of COVID. And I'd say that this is one of them. This is our opportunity to change the ratios before we fill back up as a district, essentially.
Are we also going to consider redistricting geographically?
Yes, Board Member Shumway, we had planned to have a significant analysis done this year, and it got sidelined because there were enough changes and barriers that we faced this year. So next year we will be analyzing the housing market, the growth, where the populations of our kiddos are now in neighborhoods, and we'll look at the entire district as a whole.
Okay,
So
great.
we'll have workshops on that, and count on you all to help us move through that, you and other stakeholders.
Yeah. Next year will be good because this year we're experiencing the boom.
Mhm.
And next year we'll determine whether or not this is an actual stable
Right.
increase or if we're going to experience another bust.
Yeah, we're looking forward to looking at the feeder school pathways, the neighborhoods where the numbers are, the busing routes, lengths on a bus, all of those situations.
I just want to say I'm excited that we're reducing ratios.
So we've worked with principals already. We've conducted multiple staff meetings with each principal, and we used via the lens of the currently approved and what we would hope you approve today and with this budget. And so we'll show the process we went through with one of our schools, just so you can kind of get a glimpse of how that looked. We looked at grades plans for, there's a point of essentially if you're -2 kids, you're 2 under the ratio, you don't want to cut a teacher or you don't want to cut a position. You want to look to where, hey, there's 4, there's 5, now there's 6 under. Now you want to consider restaffing that thing, and vice versa. You don't want to add because we bumped 2 students over the ratio, but that hits that 3 and that 4, you're going to need to hire. And so you use this fluctuation point to make your decisions. And we wanted to always have the room for the growth because we do expect our students to come back. So,
Always seem to every year. We lose them towards the end, then they come back the next year.
and this is so here I give you an example of Black Mountain, what we went through with Black Mountain. On the left, we show current year enrollment, current year approved ratios. In the next, you see the projection of students as they move through the grades. Now we're using what we would hope you would approve. So you can see that like first grade, they're 2.5 under the ratio, but then you get down to 6th grade and the 7th and 8th combo, you see under by 14 students or under by 13 students. And so through that discussion, we make that recommendation to close one of the 6th grade positions and close 2 of the 7th, 8th combos, which brings those ratios down to -7 and -5.8, still well above where we would like to be. But at the same time, we can't cut so deep that a school faces such a major change by trying to go to these new ratios. So we are being very light-handed with it, especially
then
where we can.
In unique situations like Black Mountain, if in the 7th and 8th, if they may not lose a teacher if we look at the programs they need to meet the needs of their kiddos. So we would hope to have growth there so that we don't have to cut, because then we wouldn't be able to provide what any typical middle school student would receive. So special circumstances in every staff comes into play. For example, when we were looking at the 3 administrators, we looked at a student population on a campus to have a baseline on should there be a 3rd administrator. It's kind of like what Mr. Jack started right before he was leaving. And for Black Mountain, for example, while they have 500 students, and that doesn't necessarily qualify for a 3rd administrator, they have a K-8 span plus a couple of special programs. So the number, and I think I gave all of this to all the board members, this formula sheet, and the schools are across the workbook on the bottom. You can go and look at any of them anytime.
With those administrators, I know we're trying to get them to define the exact special administrator they need for their school so that we can kind of take those out of any sort of ratio discussion. If we know a school is going to have a unique situation, we want to make sure that unique situation has the support it needs, whether student ratios say it needs it or not, right? So you try to separate it to deal with those special needs. If that makes sense.
And just, sorry, Aaron,
No,
one more
please.
comment. Part of the conversation also, because we're talking about teacher attrition and teachers leaving the profession. One of the number one reasons they leave, according to our district exit surveys and national surveys, is classroom management and the weight, of having to deal with all of those situations. So we have to look at, as a district, what support can we give our teachers to relieve that pressure valve in the classroom. And that's why we're identifying by each campus what the unique needs are and how to provide, like that autism specialist behavior support, or the counselor at Desert Willow, or the the SEL program at Black Mountain. So a lot goes into the staffing, but I think we're on the right track with this, with our ratio plan and the meetings we've had with the principals. And I love, like Mr. Jack said, that we can reduce that classroom ratio. And we are being quite generous. When you go through that workbook, you'll see that we're pretty much under everywhere across the board, even from the new ratio. But we would, especially, you know, if the class numbers are even below the new ratio next year, that will give our teachers an opportunity to hopefully fill the gap while we look at the landscape as you described, Beth, a few minutes ago.
Thank you.
Okay. The next topic is medical and dental premiums. I know this was a long portion of the presentation. The main thing to know is that we learned in November, late November, early December, that Kairos was going to move away from Blue Cross Blue Shield and over to United Healthcare with a third-party claims administrator known as UMR. They were a main part for our employees here is that the network has a significant overlap, and we've already gotten a tool out to our staff to start checking their physicians and the new network. And when we find out early that a physician's not connected to the network, we're working on getting them added. I think there's a new provider in town that a lot of, is it Aspire? I forget the name, but there's a new provider in town that's not on this network, and a lot of our staff has started to go over to them. So that's a big focus we've learned in the last couple of weeks of how do we get this new provider under their contract. Outside of that, plan structures and options will stay the same. Their health savings accounts will come over, retain their balances. The pharmacy coverage will still be through the same area. There is a push to get people to use the generic drugs, and this could come back to bite us on an employee by employee basis because brand name drugs are going to cost more money under the preventative, the maintenance drugs is what they're called. I'm sorry. It's going to cost more money to take a brand name than it does a generic, more than it does currently, because they want to push people to the generics when there's options. I foresee this causing some customer service issues, but as far as big changes go, that is the biggest from my perspective. Out-of-state coverage stays the same. We'll have our wellness programs, biometrics, mammograms, and flu shots. And we're going to attempt to really reach out to the entire district as far as education goes. And I think that the communications manager can help with that as well. Kairos didn't believe it was getting the claims management. So we're victims of a couple things. We're victims of our local hospitals, including Vegas, Sunrise in Vegas, in the way they bill, the way they skip pre-authorizations and things like that. So, and Kairos learned that that Blue Cross Blue Shield was like, oh, here's a claim, we pay it, instead of doing any sort of, sorry, I can't think of the word, instead of scrutinizing each claim, they're just sending them right through, even when a pre-auth could have been used. And so we're going to get more claims management, more customer service, and hopefully more education, because at the end of the day, our employees, we have to find a way to help them become better consumers of their medical care. It's an area where we don't shop, we just get what's available to us. So it's a very fine line and it's a very difficult thing, but our claims are through the roof and our rates are going up by 9%. And we're kind of at a position where the insurance company's saying we have got to make some changes. And so that's the change they're making. And what they're going to expect us to do is increase our education and the opportunities for employees to learn more about their insurance.
Is this an area where the federal, the Relief Act that just passed, does this get any help?
I mean, with that money, if I can argue that it helps us during COVID, then it can be used for it, right? And so as wide as that can be, if you can find a way to argue that our medical premiums are going up because of COVID, I could potentially get some money to offset some costs. Yes.
Yeah, well, I know my medical has gone
Mm-hmm.
up, and I'm not related to the school or
Mhm.
medical,
Mhm,
and it's insurance companies in general, and I have Blue Cross Blue Shield.
mhm, mhm.
They're, everybody's upping, I'm sure they have a lot more costs because of COVID
Mhm.
that everybody's getting hit with.
And I think you'll see on a chart coming up in a few slides where I think our urgent care at one point was sending people to the ER if they showed up with any sort of respiratory issues. Well, that pushes, was that not true? Oh, oh, sorry.
It's true.
Right. And so what that does is our insurance says go to urgent care, right? They send them to the ER. That's an ER bill. And then you'll see on the chart what it's looked like in the last 7 months of ER versus urgent care in our town when they're across the street from each other.
Right.
Um, just stop me anytime, guys. We did not necessarily like the change. We were concerned with it, so we sought quotes from other companies. The rates they offered us were well above what Kairos was going to be able to do, which was fun. Quite humorous because one of those companies a few years ago said, if you stay with us, we won't raise your rates at all. This year they said we can get you in at about 14% higher than what you're paying now. And so that's what's going on in the insurance world, as well as what's going on with our claims as a district. We matter in the course of this. We looked at hiring a broker. That's like more of a position, and that's about $100,000 a year. And I think Mr. Jackson remember kind of how the county does it. I think the county uses like a broker company to present insurance and shop insurance and make sure we get those rates. So they do a huge service for governments, but at the same time, it is incredibly cost prohibitive. So if we ever were at the end of our rope, a broker may be a way we want to go to get some better purchasing power.
It'd be kind of like our food service.
Exactly. Yes. But you'd still have to then pay for your insurance plus the person who's getting you the best insurance. So quickly down into the rates. Oh, I'm sorry. What we're getting a 9% hike. That means that every eligible employee that takes our benefits, the district will pay $9,265 for their health care premiums during the course of the year. And in the next few pages, I want to go over what things look like and why our rates are going up. What? Oh, sorry.
Passing that cost on.
Oh, right. No, we don't. We're not arguing to pass that cost on in this current year. And I'll show you how I budget it so you see that I offset some of the increase in budget. This page is called a shock. These are our shock claimants. A shock claimant is a claim that costs $50,000 or more. Okay, so we've had 13 shock claims since the beginning of our fiscal year to January, the first 7 months. So of those 13 people, they account for 2.154 million of all of our claims paid out. So of all of our employees, 13 members are responsible for 56% of our claims. So that's what a shock claim is. It's the highest, most expensive things that could happen in our district. Any questions on this? I have trouble with this one because the conditions associated with shock claims are very serious. So what is this if not just a representation of the health of several people in your district and what that costs? It's hard for me to say where would you fix something like this if it wasn't maybe some pre-authorizations that missed out or some generic drugs instead of brand name. I don't know how you would offset some of that cost. It feels like a consequence of the world, but that's my own opinion.
Right. It'd be interesting to see, to compare how many, what the number was in previous years.
Yep. And I think that's what I do a little bit in this next page.
Okay.
So the reporting period from last year, same thing, July 19 through January, you can see we had spent 3.4 million in claims. To that current period up to now, it's been 3.97 million in claims. So there's been a 15% increase in those claims. When I looked at the shock claimants last year, that percentage kind of holds. it looks very similar. And that's where I was like, well, how do you fix this? It feels like any year, your more serious conditions are going to account for the bulk of your claims. Under here, this, if you want, PEPM is price per employee per member. So basically, what the insurance company expects is paying for all of your employees in those areas versus their benchmark, what they're paying for all of their other members throughout the state. So you see like inpatient PEPM is at $208 in Kingman. Their benchmark is 130. Whereas that last year it was higher at 322. So we saw a negative or a decrease. Any questions on this? This is like your top down data. Okay. Outpatient up by 42%. This next one is the top 20 places of service, a comparison. So I really would like you to look at the emergency room versus an urgent care facility.
Well, this previous chart really shows the big increase was in prescriptions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I have that 2 slides from now. So you can see in the urgent care last year during that reporting period, we had $8,000 in claims to urgent care versus this year, 1,700. And then you go up to emergency room, you see we have 600,000 in claims these first 7 months, where we had 446,000 in claims in the previous year. I really think that that is a COVID symptom.
Well, like you said, if they have any respiratory, they need to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And typically they'll go to the urgent care so they can get it done right away, but they may get sent over to the ER, right?
Mm-hmm. We want our employees to utilize telehealth, not just for prescriptions, but because if you call telehealth and tell them your symptoms and they say, oh yeah, I can get you a prescription for that. If you have serious enough conditions, they're gonna say you need to go to urgent care, right? So wouldn't it be better to have a provider tell you, go in there, you're gonna need to go to urgent care or the emergency room, rather than thinking that's my first step and the only place, because no one really wants to sit in the emergency room. I
Well,
think it often, go ahead.
Does charge you, even just to tell you to go to emergency care, they charge you as if it's a regular, if they wrote you a prescription, same cost.
Our telehealth is not the same cost as going to the emergency room.
No, I'm saying if you called telehealth and they said, sorry, we can't help you, you need to go to emergency care, you're still gonna get their bill. Telehealth.
Oh. I wish I had my insurance person here, but I'm pretty sure telehealth is free under our coverage.
That'd be awesome.
Not free, I mean, you pay for it, but to our employees. And if anything, it's like, I could bring that back.
Last time I used it was probably 2016 or something, but it was a $40 copay or something.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, yeah, they said go to urgent care, and then I got a $40 bill from
Okay. Is there anything on this top 20 places you guys would like to see? I think it was just trying to show you how these increases have looked.
Looks good.
Okay. The next is top 20 drugs comparison. You can see that all of the drugs on that list are not generic. And you can see how much we're paying in the current first 7 months versus how much we paid in the last year's first 7 months. And this is, I think, where we would want to continue. We want our education to hopefully push some employees to generic options when they are available, and also to pre-authorizations. Like you can get, when you get really into it, someone went into KRMC, or I'm sorry, St. Joe's, I don't even know where this is, and they got a dosage via syringe of a drug, and then that hospital billed our insurance $75,000, and that was allowed. But through a normal provider, it's a $20,000 charge for that same amount of drugs. And so when the claims management kicks in, that should have, hey, what's going on here? I got this drug over here for them. We're going to need them to go over this way, rather than drug goes, charge goes, we pay, and now all of our employees face an increase. It's a trick. It's one of the only places trickle down economics actually is real.
Well, unfortunately, that's a situation with the medical billing system.
Yes.
And there's quite a few doctors that say you can only get this drug here, and if you don't do it this way, I won't be your doctor anymore.
Interesting. We're definitely not going to be able to fix all of it, but if we can mitigate some of the issues, hopefully things can get better. We have to put some power into our employees' hands. That's it on insurance. I do want to say that, so on a year-to-year basis, about 70% of our eligible employees take our insurance. In the past, I've budgeted as if 100% of our eligible employees take our insurance. This year is a way to offset budget, because I'm holding money for something we never spend on. I said, what would it cost for all of us to have benefits? Now I'm going to budget that at 80%. So I didn't drop all the way to the 70, but I did drop it to 80%. So on this next page where you see medical budget, that's the amount I'm budgeting for premiums. And right next to it is how much it would be if every eligible person took it. Does that make sense? I'm offsetting it beforehand because we traditionally haven't spent it. And that goes into, my carryover is a little too high. We want to tighten that up. So it's good this year, it offsets it, but there's a chance that next year, as we tighten that budget more and those increases keep coming, we will have to look to employees to potentially pick up costs. I would hope that we would start at the most $10 per month or something like that, but that's a discussion for next year. I think we're about to that point where we can't go any further without asking for some employee assistance on the premium payments.
Though we're hoping that some of the big chunk of some of this increase was COVID related and medical system COVID related. And in 23, it'll all stabilize again.
Yeah, because if we faced a 3% increase, I think you wouldn't want to pass that on to your employees. You face another 9%, you may need to reconsider. Any questions here? Sorry, so this next thing, now that I've told you how I did medical budget, this is the compensation budget for FY22. This includes all of it, all the raises we've talked about, all the positions we've talked about, all the benefits and all. So you see that that's roughly going to cost us 40.8 million. And if you remember my M&O, I want to get it to 51. So that leaves about 10 million for operations, which is standard over the last several years. And then you see that that compensation increase will cost about $3 million total as compared to current year. Little bit unfair there because current year budget is much more detailed because people are in it and working and we've paid money. And this other one is, again, a projection, as it always is at this time of year. But I think it gives you a clear picture of roughly what these changes cost us. The next page are budget breakouts, M&O only. One thing I do want to ask here is that the board consider raising athletics and extracurricular stipends by 10% to accommodate for the fact salaries have gone up in that time and stipends haven't been touched for those specific things. And then the district will raise school discretionary budgets by those percentages so that they have enough to cover those stipends.
I agree.
Okay.
We had a hard time finding athletic coaches.
Did you is that a question or a statement?
Question, have we?
I think someone else
There
could
are
speak to
fewer
that.
people in the pool whenever there's an opening.
There are fewer people in the pool?
And the pool of applicants, not the swimming pool, but yeah.
Okay.
That too.
So we are having a hard time. So that's why we're thinking about raising is to,
Yes, and it came to it came to meet and confer as well. It has for several years actually, where coaches have asked the meet and confer reps, mostly on the secondary campuses where the athletics are, to consider an increase in the stipends. So that's why it's on the discussion board.
Right, I think it's reflective of the people who coach every year. Those are our teachers for the most part, Jen. And they're saying, hey, my salary's gone up and my stipend that you essentially I do every year and you can count on me hasn't. So can that go up too? And that's how this discussion got here. So it's less about filling the positions and more about accommodating the people that already do it.
so I'm just trying to figure out how, so is it 5,000? Under athletics, the third down, it says 5,000. Is that what we pay for coaching a season?
No, that 5,000 down there is like a district level $5,000 to offset if like kids go to the playoffs at the end of the year and a school has already paid its spent all of its athletics, the district steps in and makes sure that they can go to the playoffs. It's contingency in the district. I just wanted to show that we offset sometimes to ensure that the kids have the opportunities that they've earned.
So do we pay a stipend, the same stipend, no matter the sport? So if they're cheerleading coach versus a football coach, they all get the same stipend?
No, they fluctuate, and that's a difficult one because I think
would
even
like
if
to
we
standardize it.
centralized it, it would
Mhm.
still have different rates for different sports. But up at to now, it's discretionary based on what the schools are offering.
There is a bit of a standard, having been in high school, where a varsity coach makes X amount of dollars. If you're a varsity head coach, a varsity assistant coach, try to look at, cheerleading is a multi-season sport. And there was always a conversation, should they have head coach salary twice because they cover more than one season?
Yeah.
So there are some variances, but it's fairly standard across the two campuses. But we're getting ready to have a conversation with athletic directors and principals to look at what this 10%, if it's approved, means, and how to to reduce variability and standardize better.
So for example, chess coaches, do they make comparable to another athletic team?
No,
Under
No.
the curricular?
Yeah, there is definitely variability between athletics and extracurricular, Jen. That's something we need to look at.
Yes, that's what I was gonna bring up, is that extracurricular is that's not sports after school. That is our academics, our enrichment.
music and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so chess and robotics, those are above and beyond as coaches would, correct? Because they take them to state and those sort of things, correct?
Yeah, and the amounts definitely vary. I think the only area where it's more similar is like debate, because debate used to be considered a sport.
Right. As principals, we were given a lump sum. So I can't remember. Let's say at Lee Williams, I might have gotten $12,000. Let's say. Don't quote me on that, but a lump sum. And then I would have to look at the things going on in my school, department chairs. Do I want, does my drama teacher put on a huge production? Does she need a stipend because, there's a lot of evening practices and performances, and I'd have to break apart my lump sum and sort of divvy it out. That was separate than the athletics, which is more of the standard.
Maybe we should.
Star's nodding because she actually did that work when we were there. So she can answer a lot of these questions.
Well, I would like to see that be a little bit more equitable.
Yeah, and across more of the after-school teachers that are doing these things that aren't getting any stipends
Right.
for them.
I totally agree. And this goes back to the dive in the economy you spoke about, when Mr. Jackson and the team at that time were having to to cut pennies at a time, right? Searching for every penny. Most of those stipends went to $1, almost like a placeholder value for things like chess club and the extracurriculars. And I don't know that we've stabilized or standardized it again. So Board Member Shumway, I saw Aaron take a note. I think we'll come back with a proposal on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, like, for example, Lego League in middle school, is there even a stipend for that? Because I didn't have one when I was teaching.
There could be, but a lot of times with those, it's either come in the 21st century, so there's definitely stipend, there's hourly pay for it. But then if, correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, like first, they were here on our campus potentially, but they weren't a district organization. And their funds and the operating was different rather than the district paying a stipend to do FIRST robotics, because it was across 2 schools.
Okay, so that's going to be a discussion, is what's qualifying, because I think any after school that a teacher provides for our students
Yeah, our teachers providing for our students.
should get a
Yeah.
stipend. And FIRST was never anybody but our teachers.
Well, and in our
Okay.
strategic planning process, and some of them might grin at me, our frame of context is if then. So the way we'll approach it, if I'm an extracurricular activity provider with KUSD, then I can expect to earn this, do this with our students. And then for students, same thing. If I'm a student in KUSD, then I can expect to have these activities available to me. So we have to balance it on both sides,
Right.
keeping the 4As going and compensating those who are providing it.
So I also want, since we're talking about budget, that I definitely want to look at us increasing this extracurricular budget and then determining where that's going. But we need to increase it because there are a lot of teachers that provide extracurricular or would that don't get compensated, or the position's not considered compensatable yet.
Well, even for athletics, I'd like to know if the head coach of the boys basketball team is making the same as the head coach of the girls basketball team. And, is the swim coach that gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning getting compensated, as much as our wrestling coach. So I would just like to see that breakdown.
Okay.
Okay.
You want that across grants too, since that's pays for a ton of our stipends, like the
Yeah.
things you're talking about.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
all dollars.
Okay. Budget breakouts, this is capital only. You'll see the district offsets athletics 15,000 for additional capital needs. They do the same for extracurricular. Yep. Go ahead.
Under extracurricular, would that be where you find music instruments?
Yep.
And those sorts of
Yep,
things?
I work directly with Julie Gregg on her budget every year that's outside of all of the school's discretionary budgets. And so then she works with the music coordinators. What's your school covering? What are your needs? And then we supplement with that district level money. And it's worked quite well over the last couple of years for new instruments, instrument repairs, and things like that.
Okay. And given what you just said, that all that can be done within that 23,000.
Yes, yes. It hasn't been an issue since. I laugh because I'm sure if it went to 50, we could spend that too if we needed to, right? So I know Julie could.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other? Oh, I'm sorry. On the previous page, 3 million budgeted for utilities. 500,000 of that's going to be that loan payment to Mid-State, our first year loan payment.
Okay.
But there's a chance we move that into ESSER, the federal COVID money, and get out from under that for our first year and get all those savings for ourselves.
Couple other capital questions.
Yes, sir.
When I'm going around visiting schools, still an issue at least at some of the schools, or about half the schools, I guess, that I visited were copiers.
Yeah.
And I know that's something we've struggled with
Mhm.
and worked hard to provide the service to the schools.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that we're looking at? Is there anything else we can do? I know it's a 5-year contract. We've
Mhm.
kind of got our hands tied.
Yeah, you'd have to pay out the financing charges to get out from underneath their contract. You know, right now we're paying the 200,000 a year for the copiers we have. There have been some issues, service issues, some staff issues, and we've tried to work through them. And then just when we think we got it, another one springs up, and you're all, you know, you're only as good as the last week of copying almost. So I would like to request that IT and I work together to see if we can find a supplemental situation that we can do in the next year, but more of a long-term solution after this lease is up, because I'd like to solve this forever. You know, I do not like the way it is. I don't think anybody does. We're basically praying every day that it doesn't go down, but it's difficult. It's just a difficult situation. So I would ask that we work to find a supplemental thing and then position ourselves at the end of the 5 years to go with a more complete package, I guess. It's hard to say what they can do, right? We have robust machines. We have 2 machines at some places. So it's like, what else can we do? But I'm not opposed to looking at it because we look at it consistently.
I think that's a good plan.
Okay. So
The other question is kind of like the elephant in the room sometimes is when we talk about Palo Christie and where we're going to go with that and what we're going to do with it. Are you looking at some type of a short-term plan as well as a long-term plan as far as being good stewards of that facility until we can figure out what else can be done with it?
I can speak to what Devin and I have
Please
recently
do,
discussed.
yes.
Our new facilities, well, new. He's almost on a year, so he gets to lose the new status. But Devin has been doing a really great job. He new to the community, but he has taken Palo Christie as one of his projects. He's been meeting with SFB, building that relationship, as you know, can be tenuous and difficult. But he's working with them primarily to look at our square footage, because we've always felt our square footage is off. And one of the main factors is that Palo Christie is still among our inventory. So he started the relationship by talking about mothballing the square footage of Palo Christie, if you will. But he's also at the beginning stages of seeing where he can work with them to help some of the refurbishment. Because if we did need another school in the future, when we get all of those kids and then some back, we would love Palo Christie, obviously, to be that school. So Devin is really taking it upon himself, Mr. Jackson. The short term, he's got the roof, I believe he just, for the gym. He's refurbishing the gym. He's got that all in order, and now he's trying to spread out to the rest of the building. So it's the facilities. It's in their top 5 priorities right now. And I'll actually have him come to the do the board report for me in April, and he can firsthand tell you what he's been doing.
That's all, Rick. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be good to know.
I don't know when to jump in if you guys are talking or not. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I just got to go. Has our budget increased for technology software needs as a result of COVID, and going forward, how we're going to maintain that?
The budget you see there is reflective of work IT and the admin team have done to look at needs in the current year, look at needs 5 years from now, but also much of our IT related COVID spending is not here because we've been able to use the federal money for it. But I
Couple of things. Yes.
guess, yeah, I don't have an answer.
Yeah,
other-
when we did our internal scan, board member Shumway, for the district, Mr. Pope gave us an inventory, and in that inventory, he included the shelf life of current computers. For example, X number of them come up, their term comes up next winter. And so we're looking at using some of the COVID money to buy ahead things that would, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Sherman, typically be covered in our capital. ESSER is able to cover it because we had to send most of our devices home at some point during the year. So we'll use the money to not only replace those that are coming term on life, but to replace the ones that didn't come back or didn't come back in working order. And then to increase the inventory. Mr. Pope, did you want to add anything to that? Okay. If you have any more questions, he'll answer from the back. But the
Okay.
answer is yes, we're expanding and it's 100% going to land on our strategic planning priority list.
Excellent. Thank you.
Is it me? What are we doing here? Federal COVID money, unless you guys have any more about capital. Just quickly, we've $2 million in COVID spending, thanks to the federal government that didn't hit our books. 2 new buses, just got those approved and covered every dime paid for COVID sick leave, even up to a certain time. So now ESSER 2 was part of the December bill, right? The prior administration's bill. That's worth $7 million to us next year, and we have through 2023 to spend it. So this is where we're going to look to make our loan payment. Yeah, make our loan payment for the air quality, more temperature scanning, keep our COVID custodians for another year, any sort of online we got to do the entire summer, like anything I can tie COVID to, which is about everything at this point, we can get paid for out of that money. So $7 million is substantial, and ESSER 3 is probably coming as well with the most recent stimulus bill passed by the new administration.
Which will include our HVAC, hopefully?
That's what I'm talking about, air quality and the loan payment, right? So you make the loan payment with one and potentially we get more money. We start dealing with HVAC that Mid-State's not dealing with. And then we leave this thing with ACs for all. And yeah, it's wild the way this part is working out for our district.
Right, this is exactly what we couldn't get done with the bond.
Exactly. No on the bond, yes on the pandemic. This is essentially what's happened. I'm sorry.
Does that include being able to look at the 2-pipe system versus a 3-pipe system that Manzanita and Kingman Middle School, some of those systems that we just have not had the money to do?
You know, any of those areas where what we're learning through Mid-State now is they fix those schools, the changing those actual systems, and I think maybe you understand, is a matter of gutting that entire school. And under the Mid-State plan now, they believe they're addressing the issues there. But if those issues weren't addressed and anything that sprang out, we would definitely use the COVID money for that. We would have to have more discussion about whether or not changing from the 2-pipe to the 4-pipe was actually as impactful as we have been perceived that it would be in the past.
Gotcha.
Right.
Makes sense.
I'm learning that potentially that wasn't the best fix, but you never, that's just new as new information comes out.
Right, thanks.
Anything else about COVID money? Okay.
Windows?
Anything that I could say helps with the bringing kids back to school for COVID and dealing with the effects of COVID. So if you said, I don't know, I'd have
Thinking
to
about,
think of the argument.
Like Mrs. Shumway, when she had taught at Wallapai, old building, the windows didn't open,
Uh-huh.
if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we can fit it under ventilation, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I wish Devin was here because a lot of that is being addressed with our construction, but those things that aren't and that we can fold in, that's what we would be doing for sure.
That's great.
The November props that passed, I think I've mentioned these 20 times. I don't think, unless you guys want me to talk again about it, I'm just going to skip that piece. The idea is that I didn't account for any of those increases. Let's see what they are, and we'll make our plans based off of those for the following year.
Yeah, and 207 is there's no money for K-12.
Yeah, but tax revenue is tax revenue.
Oh, well, it's true. Tax revenue.
If all of a sudden the state's full of money from their tax revenue, some of that goes to us.
Well, and I was going to say there may be crossover in that it's for post-secondary, but our agreements with MCC, it may benefit us in that way.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, it's hard. 207 is not earmarked for schools, but it is it's revenue. And when with revenue comes more for schools. The 208 is earmarked though. So here's the teacher compensation fund. There's a fund that ADE offers. And if you remember a couple weeks ago, we got that, or a couple months, we brought the evaluation program to you and you guys voted on a statement of assurance that our evaluation program meets the law of the state. Doing that potentially opens up this teacher compensation fund that could be worth a 1 to 2% increase in pay for our teachers. That could show up in June. The way I would, and then I would expect to have it every year, right? So in this first year, to avoid having to issue contracts again, I would pay it via a stipend. But then I'd fold that stipend into their salaries as we move into 23, and then I would start applying it as a normal raise. So the only reason I give it as a stipend in this first year is to avoid issuing new contracts, but that money would be folded into their salaries moving forward. It is not a one-time situation. For as long as we could keep that fund active, we're only allowed by law to pay teachers with it. So that's the plan with that. If you have issues with that, let me know. And then as that comes out, I will report the amount and exactly what it means for our teachers once I get that money. Lastly, procedure proposal, the sick leave buyback. I brought this a couple years ago. It's still in meet and confer. People are still interested in it. It's a retention procedure. It is a way for employees who have racked up a ton of sick leave to spend some of that off without retiring. We have a retirement policy that's already on the books of how we pay that sick leave. This would be completely separate and only for employees that are returning. There's a maximum amount of hours we'll pay on the retirement of 1,800. So let's say you're a person with 1,900 and you're still going to work here a few more years, you could sell back that 100 over time to us, get a little compensation, and then retire and get your full payment. And so it really is a retention technique and for some of our most tenured and reliable employees, if you think about it, because the ones with that much sick leave show up every day. At most, I see you spending maybe $50,000 a year on it, and that's liberal.
You
Not-
don't want to incentivize people coming to work sick.
No, you don't. And that's why I would argue getting rid of perfect attendance. But that's for another day. Here is the actual draft language of the proposal. It mimics our retirement and does make it an employee ineligible to sell back their leave at the end of the year if they used potentially an excessive amount during the year. And we set that to 32 hours in a semester. If you called off 4 days or 5 days in a semester, you wouldn't be allowed to sell some of that sick leave at the end of the year back. And that mimics our retirement policy.
So philosophically, the sick leave is a part of their compensation package.
Philosophically, yes.
And so buying back sick days is actually a bonus on top of their compensation package.
Yes.
Well, isn't it Arizona law now that, you provide a certain number of sick hours for sick time or for work hours worked?
It is law that you provide time, but it is not law that you have to pay them for unused. By law, I got to give them the hours. By law, I do not have to pay them when they don't use it.
Okay. So, and this is for teachers only or for all districts?
It's for all district, classified and certified, and they have different rules that govern each.
Okay.
And again, it mimics our retirement procedure, which follows the same thing, different rules for different classifications of employees, maximum amount that you can use.
I know we're looking at this as an incentive.
Mhm.
I would like to have what kind of impact this is, give some scenarios to the budget, just like the 10-year projection. What would this look like in those 10 years? With different scenarios of how many people using it or not. because
Okay.
it could have a significant impact on our budget.
I would disagree with you on that. I think it's limited. You have to have a certain amount of hours in your bank and you can only sell so much. And it's at an extremely low rate that you can sell that. So it's a small amount of people, a small amount of hours. That's why I say I don't foresee it more than 50K.
We could,
Oh,
we could
total?
look at.
Yeah,
sorry,
50K a year.
We could look at how many people qualify
Yep.
for this. That would be a point of interest, I think, that you might be seeking. How many people actually would qualify to have that many hours on the books in the first place?
Well,
And for
I mean,
teachers,
50,000 if we're talking 50,000 a year.
Mhm. That would be my estimate based on who qualifies now, but
Okay.
I could do a deeper dive to show you exactly how I got those numbers.
Rough is okay.
Okay.
I'm just picturing that's another salary.
It is.
for teachers, when they sell back sick leave, it's offset by what they would have used, and then we had to use a substitute for. So by them selling back hours, we're saving substitute hours. So I think it offsets in that regard.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Well, yeah, the most a teacher could sell back in a given year, a teacher with more than 10 years would only be $650 a payout.
So
That's
it's really not that much of an effect on the budget.
nope.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to get at is it's a minimal effect to the budget and actual as you head into summer, a nice impact on the people who don't work for 12 months.
Right.
And lastly, part two is kind of where our initiatives are moving forward. We've already talked about the autism support program. If we want to talk more about online education, which we're approved to do next year and moving forward, we've been building a framework to update our strategic mission using hard data, interviews with stakeholders, and continued discussion among leaders. And the district has 30 staff going through an intensive leadership training, and the lessons learned thus far have already started showing up throughout this district. And a lot of the people in that leadership, there are some teachers too. So clear, just real quick, I do not need approval here, but I do need the conditional approval to go and put these into our budget and move forward.
I'm liking what I see.
Yeah, I like what I've seen.
Yeah, me too.
I took notes on what you guys asked for. Jen, do I have your conditional approval to move forward?
Yes, sorry, I'm on mute and then forget to mute. It's a Zoom.
It's cool. Thank you guys.
Thank
Okay.
you.
I think that was an outstanding PowerPoint. Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
gave us a real catalyst for discussions.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. It means a lot to me.
Really good job. All right. Moving on to item number 5, approval of routine orders of business. I have one question on the term list. Are those positions that term at end at the end of the year for next year, or are they actually right now?
Members of the board, the date of some of the people who have submitted their resignation, they've submitted their resignation as of now for the end of the year. So they'll finish out their current contract and then not plan to return for the
So you
next
can tell
school
by
year.
the date, Director Mareski, if it says 5/27, let's say Casson from Kingman High,
Mhm.
she finishes the school year, but the one above that,
Correct.
Kimberly Alexander, the driver, is resigned as of now.
That is correct.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you. Do I have a motion for routine orders of business?
So moved.
I'll second.
Have a motion by Ms. Young and a second by Ms. Weiser. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I do have one question. Are we doing follow-up questions with people as to why they're leaving the district?
Oh, yeah.
I'll answer, or you can come over to Jerry's microphone.
Yes, we are. We are utilizing both in-person conversations and an electronic platform or a web-based platform to gather feedback so that we know what we're doing well and where we can improve going forward.
I'm just curious if these resignations that we're getting, especially by the teachers, is COVID related more or other things?
It's really, we're seeing it's mostly other things and
Okay.
and not COVID related.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 6, approval to have 3 separate CTDS numbers for our approved AOI. These numbers will signify K5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12, grade groups of students with school finance.
Members of the board, we're asking to do this so that we're still held accountable by the state as far as a report card or a letter grade. So having 3 different numbers, CTDS numbers, will help with that.
Can we spell out the acronyms?
The CTDS number,
Approved online instruction, or do you mean the CTDS?
What the acronym stands for?
it's our identification number for each of our schools. I just
Okay.
know that's what it is. Aaron, can you help?
No, I'm a county to out district, state, something like that. It's basically your category number in the state for
Okay.
a school or a district.
I figured that's what it was, but I wanted to make sure that anybody listening would know.
Right.
It's identification number for each
Right.
school.
And AOI again.
It's our online schooling.
Right.
We were approved for our online.
That's
Yeah.
pretty exciting that we are officially approved to have an elementary, a middle, and a high school online. And they
Yes.
will be their own school.
In case you're wondering, it'll be Kingman Online Learning Academy Elementary, Kingman Online Learning Academy 6A Middle School, and then high school.
Wonderful. I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
Got a motion by Ms. Weiser, a second by Ms. Young. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item number 7.
We're
Study-
request, oh,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Oh, it just, studies weekly to be on display for the required 60 days beginning March 19th, 2021.
This information is on display for public.
Okay, looking for a motion for item 7.
It's just discussion
Oh,
only.
sorry, it's just discussion, yeah. Do that all the time. All right, item number 8, authorize the reduction in force of 1 teacher on assignment position at Desert Willows Elementary School and take action to non-renew the employment of Danielle Moore.
Can I just jump in before you do, Director Maskey? Mr. Vice President, members of the board, I just want to add one point of information before we go into this. We're using the term reduction in force, which is a little bit confusing. We've met with meet and confer and principals multiple times on the staffing. And it is our general philosophy and goal as a district to not just riff teachers in general. So if we have Wallop High School and Surbat School and some other schools that have a little bit of the ratios are off balance and they need to go down by teachers, our hope is always that it happens through attrition. There are a few situations Mr. Sherman mentioned in the previous PowerPoint that are unique positions. For example, the one you're going to discuss here, number 8, there is only the 1 teacher on assignment. So it's not, you can't wait for that resignation and then hope to absorb it because that position is going away. So when you look at these few items, it's because of the unique position and that 1 position, and there's 1 person that holds it's going away. And then on item 10, you'll see in a minute, there are special circumstances.
So if I may, people would then get the paperwork that says, okay, this job's going away. Now you may apply
Yes.
for.
And Ms. Mareski will
Mhm.
explain what the process.
Yes,
Right.
so,
Thank you.
yes, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. In each of these cases, what we have, there's been, one or more conversations with the individual. We've let them know that the position itself is being eliminated, but have also been very explicit that if there are other positions for which they are qualified within the district that are open, we've encouraged them to apply for those positions so that they can be considered.
Okay, thank you. Any
Okay.
other questions?
So we don't say, okay, Joshua Telly's, I know I'm jumping, but let's use that as an example. Hey, we actually have a 5th grade position at Wallapai. Can we just move you there? They have to apply separately and interview separately. We can't just say, hey, we don't want to lose a 5th grade teacher. Let's say, here, there's a position, have it. We make them go through the process.
That's why these are on here, Ms. Shumway, they're unique, including number 10, which Ms. Mareski can explain when we get to it. Circumstances are a little different than just a teacher who could easily move to another position. If that were the case, that would have happened. So
Okay.
she'll explain it.
Okay. All right. I will wait my turn.
Okay. There's specific languages for these next few actions. So I will move to non-renew the employment of Danielle Moore due to a reduction in force and to authorize Angela Morosky, Human Resources Director, to notify the staff member on behalf of the governing board. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Ms. Young. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 9, authorize the reduction in force of the Yale Gifted Interventionist position at Desert Willow Elementary School and take action to non-renew the employment of Robert Norman. Any questions by the board?
No.
I would just like to know what that position did and why it's going away.
Ms. Shumway, members of the board, that position is a grant, was, depending on the vote, a grant-funded position where it was a pull-out program versus an inclusive program provided to the students. So the direction the district is taking with Desert Willow is to provide more of a comprehensive inclusion program in the classroom versus a pull-out program.
Excellent.
Okay. I move to non-renew the employment of Robert Norman, due to a reduction in force and to authorize Angela Morosky, Human Resources Director, to notify the staff member on behalf of the governing board. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Have a second by Mrs. Weiser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10, authorize reduction in force of 1 5th grade teaching position at Surbat Elementary School and take action to non-renew the employment of Joshua Telowitz. Any comments by the board?
I want to
Mr.
hear what, yeah.
Mr. Vice
Okay. President
President and members of the board. So to answer Ms. Shumway's, what I believe to be Ms. Shumway's question, we have a certified transfer season. So essentially that opens up at the beginning of February and ends around the time that employment contracts by certified staff are due back to the district as to whether they accept or not. And so oftentimes there are teachers who are interested in moving to different positions. So one of the things that we want to provide is the opportunity for any internal certified teachers to be considered for the different positions and conduct a process. And so for that reason, generally reassignments are not made. It's more of a process.
And to qualify to transfer, you need to be a certified teacher.
And that is correct. And that's another piece of it that, there's the certification itself. You need to have the proper certification to go into the position for which you are applying.
Thank you for that.
Okay. I move to non-renew the employment of Joshua Tellis due to a reduction in force and to authorize Angela Morawski, Human Resources Director, to notify the staff member on behalf of the governing board. Do I have a second?
A second.
Got a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 11, authorize reduction in force of one mechanic position at the Transportation Department and to take action to non-renew the employment of Mark Fig.
Mr. Vice President and members of the board, the Transportation Department has done an analysis, and with newer buses coming into the fleet, a lot of the work to be done on those buses is warranty work. And some of that warranty work, or perhaps a large portion, is done by the seller of the buses in order for the warranty to remain intact. They may allow for some of that warranty work if it's simple tasks to be done by district personnel, but a large part of it is done by the seller of the buses. So with new buses coming in, I believe there's another 7 or so or 8 that are coming in August or September. They feel that we can effectively go down one mechanic position and still be able to perform all of the necessary and proper work in a safe fashion.
Any questions or comments by board members?
I'm just curious, I don't think we can do anything about it right now, but I'm curious if we can't have a maintenance, a mechanic trained that the warranty would cover their work. So we would have an internal mechanic that that was qualified to do the warranty work.
We're not allowed to do that according to what company we purchase the buses from. So we purchase those buses. They say we will warranty the work with our mechanics at our facility, or they bring a mechanic here and they do it. Like Ms. Morawski said, that there are some small items that we are allowed to do, but it's all within the, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I move to non-renew the employment of Mark Fig due to a reduction in force and to authorize Angela Morawski, Human Resources Director, to notify the staff member on behalf of the governing board. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Ms. Weiser. All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries. Next item 12, move to non-renew the employment of Ms. Sampson Warnick for the 2021-22 school year for the reasons to be stated in a letter to the teacher, and to authorize the Human Resources Director to sign the letter on behalf of the governing board.
Mr. Vice President and members of the board, this action item is a little bit different than the prior ones. It is not being brought forth as a reduction in force. It is being brought forward to you for the reasons that are explained in the confidential memo that was provided to the board.
Okay. Any comments or questions by board members?
No.
Okay, I move to non-renew the employment of Ms. Sanson Warnick due to a reduction in force and to authorize Angela Morosky, Human Resources Director, to notify the staff member on behalf of the governing board. Do I have a second?
It's
I'll
not,
second.
it's not a renewal, reduction in force.
Correct?
So that-
That's correct. Yeah, it is not a reduction in force. It's a
Termination.
a recommendation to terminate Ms. Sampson Warnock's employment for the reasons stated in the confidential memo to the governing board.
Oh, okay.
So if you're okay, Mr. Jacks, if you would withdraw that motion.
I will withdraw that motion.
And then I move to follow the advice of our Human Resources Director for the non-renewal of employment. Mrs. Sampson Warnock.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Weiser, a second by Ms. Young. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 13, possible action to approve the settlement agreement of Kelly Weiss.
So, Mr. Vice President and members of the board, Ms. Wise previously resigned her employment, and that was approved by the board previously. This is a follow-up to that, and it is an agreement that has been agreed to by Ms. Wise and that we are bringing forward to you for consideration as part of the separation.
Any questions or comments by the board? Looking for a motion on.
I have a question. This isn't common, correct? Like typically when we part ways outside of a settlement. So
I apologize. Sorry for interrupting. Yes, you are correct, Ms. Shumway. This isn't the typical norm. Sometimes there are circumstances of the separation process that lend itself to more of an agreement such as this one that we are seeking to enter into with Ms. Wise.
okay, and I'm reading through the agreement and it doesn't sound too odd. So I'm just trying to read between the lines, I suppose, because it's very much a legal document rather than a expository document. So
That's
okay.
correct. Yeah.
I'll
And
leave
then
Okay, so a motion by Ms. Sumway, looking for a second.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Young. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And that brings us up to adjournment. Any other comments or questions by the board?
You did a good job, Rose.
I motion to adjourn.
Have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.